The air in the Xylo's arboretum was thick and warm. It smelled of wet soil and strange flowers. Ji-hun wiped a small drop of sweat from her forehead. She was a young woman from Korea, here on the huge alien space station called the Omni Citadel. It was a place for many different kinds of life from across the stars. She was only an intern, a student learning about engineering. Her job was to help with simple tasks. Next to her, her friend Dae-ho sighed. "I can't believe we have to check every sensor in this place," he said, looking at the large garden. Plants with purple leaves grew next to trees that seemed to be made of blue glass. "It will take all day." "It's not so bad," Ji-hun said softly. She pointed to her identification tag, which was pinned to her plain gray jumpsuit. The glowing letters on it said, "Student, Provisional." "We're lucky to be here. We get to see all of this." Dae-ho just shook his head. He was also a student from Korea, but he did not share her sense of wonder. To him, the station was just a very big, very strange place to work. He thought they should keep their heads down, do their job, and not attract any attention. Their boss was a large alien named Tov. He was a Calthorian. He was much bigger than a human, with thick green scales and sharp yellow eyes. He was the chief of station security. He was walking toward them now, his heavy steps making a solid sound on the metal walkway. "The Level 5 Sector Diagnostics," Tov said, his voice a low rumble. "Are they complete?" "Almost, sir," Ji-hun answered quickly. She held up her data pad. "We are just finishing the calibration on the last few sensors." Tov gave a short nod. He was a being of few words. He believed in order and rules. The station ran on a very smart computer system called the Nexus Integrated Grid, or NIG for short. It was a perfect system of logic, built by the Calthorians and their allies. It controlled everything from the lights to the air to the gravity. Tov trusted the system completely. Suddenly, a sharp alarm sound cut through the quiet air of the arboretum. A red light began to flash from a section of the garden not far from where they stood. This section was made to look like a water world, with small ponds and a misty, warm atmosphere. "Report," Tov barked, tapping a device on his own wrist. A calm, computer voice answered from everywhere at once. It was the voice of the NIG. "Alert. Environmental failure in Sector Gamma 9. Temperature dropping rapidly. Life support compromise for flora classification. Aquaspire. Estimated time until loss, 6 minutes." Dae-ho looked at his data pad, his eyes wide. "The main thermal regulator for that sector just went offline. It's a complete failure. Initiate standard backup protocol," Tov commanded. "Reroute power from the secondary grid." "The system is trying, sir," Dae-ho said, his fingers flying over the screen. "But the failure is cascading. It's like a chain reaction. The backup pathways are failing too." Tov growled, a deep sound in his chest. This was a problem. The plants in that sector were very rare and delicate. Losing them would be a big diplomatic problem with the species that owned them. While Dae-ho frantically searched the manual for a solution and Tov argued with the NIG, Ji-hun was quiet. She was looking at the error messages scrolling on her own datapad. To Dae-ho and Tov, it was just a list of broken parts. But to Ji-hun, it was like a story. She could see a pattern in the chaos. The failures were not random. They were like a knot all tied together. One broken thing was pulling another thing down with it. The official solution was to try and fix each broken part one by one. But Ji-hun saw that there was no time for that. She saw a different way. It was not a way she learned from a book. It was a feeling in her gut. A path through the mess. She stopped looking at her assigned data pad. She walked quickly to a small dusty panel on a nearby wall. It was a tertiary maintenance panel, not meant for big emergencies. Most people forgot it was even there. "What are you doing?" Dae-ho hissed. "That's not the control interface." Ji-hun did not answer. She pried the panel open. Inside was a simple keyboard and a small screen. She started to type. She was not typing standard commands. She was putting in a series of codes that looked strange. She was telling the system to ignore the broken main regulator completely. She was asking it to pull a little bit of power from 3 different non-essential systems nearby and route it through a forgotten junction box. To the NIG, this request was illogical. It broke 7 different safety protocols. It was not the correct way to solve the problem. But the NIG was also designed to process requests from authorized users. And Ji-hun was making a request. The system paused for a moment, its logic circuits conflicting. Then it accepted the commands. The red light in Sector Gamma 9 stopped flashing. The alarm silenced. The gentle hum of the warming units returned. The temperature stabilized. The aquaspire plants, which had started to droop, slowly perked up again. The air was suddenly very quiet. Daeho stared at his data pad, his mouth open. It's fixed. The cascade stopped. How did you do that? Tov turned his large body slowly to look at Ji-hoon. His yellow eyes were narrowed, first in relief, then in confusion. He walked over to her. Intern Ji-hoon. That was not a procedure in the manual. Ji-hoon felt her face get warm. She looked down. I just thought of another way, sir. The main path was blocked, so I used a smaller path. Tov looked from her face to the maintenance panel and then back to her face. He was about to say something more when his eyes caught the glow of her ID tag. He stopped. He leaned in a little closer. Ji-hoon froze. She did not know what was wrong. For a very brief moment, less than a second, the letters on her ID tag had changed. They had flickered. Instead of saying student, provisional, they had glowed with a different, higher-level word. Administrator. Then, just as quickly, it flickered back to student. Tov straightened up. He blinked his inner eyelids, a sign of Calthorian confusion. He had seen it. He was sure of it. But it made no sense. An administrator was a high-ranking station official. This was just a student. It must have been a glitch. A trick of the strange light in the arboretum, reflecting off the purple leaves. The station's systems were perfect. They did not make such errors. He decided it was not important. The crisis was over. That was quick thinking, Tov said finally, his voice back to its normal rumble. Unorthodox, but effective. Do not make a habit of it. He turned and walked away, already reporting the stable status of the sector to his superiors. Ji-hoon let out a breath she did not know she was holding. Her hands were shaking a little. She looked at Daeho, who was still staring at her. What was that about? Daeho asked. Why did he look at your tag like that? I don't know, Ji-hoon whispered. She looked down at the simple plastic tag on her chest. It glowed steadily, once again reading student, but for a moment she too had felt something strange. A feeling like a door opening somewhere deep in the station just for her, and then closing again. She shook her head, trying to clear the thought. It was just her imagination. It had to be. The strange event in the arboretum was quickly pushed from Ji-hoon's mind. There was too much work to do. The station, the Omni Citadel, was a city among the stars, and it always needed fixing. For the next few days, she and Daeho were sent to different sections to do simple repair jobs. They replaced old power conduits and cleaned dust from air vents, but things kept happening. Small, strange things. While working in a cargo bay, a locked storage door slid open for Ji-hoon before she even touched the panel. Daeho, who was right behind her, had to wait for a security scan. In the main transit hub, the tram seemed to arrive the moment Ji-hoon walked onto the platform. Daeho grumbled that she was just lucky. Ji-hoon did not feel lucky. She felt watched. She started to notice a quiet hum in the back of her mind when she was near certain computer terminals. It was not a real sound, but a feeling of something vast and intelligent paying attention to her. Meanwhile, in a quiet office deep in the station's security sector, a woman named Su-min was having a very bad week. Su-min was a network architect. Her job was to watch over the health of the Nexus integrated grid. The NIG, she was brilliant and took her work very seriously. And right now, her perfect system was behaving strangely. It started with the logs. The NIG kept a record of every single action taken by every single person on the station. One day Su-min saw an alert. A high-level command had been issued to unlock a sensitive maintenance shaft in the hydroponics sector. The command was issued by a user with administrator clearance. This was a problem. The station's head administrator was on leave. There were no other administrators on duty. Su-min immediately thought it was a hacker, a digital intruder. She began to dig deeper. She tracked the administrator access across the station's network. The pattern made no sense. This user was not stealing data or causing damage. They were doing small, almost pointless things. They had briefly accessed the environmental controls in the Arboretum on the day of the temperature failure. They had queried the tram schedule in the main hub. They had unlocked that storage door in Cargo Bay 4. It was like a ghost was wandering the station, touching things out of curiosity. The most confusing part was how the NIG was reacting. When a real hacker tries to break in, the system fights back. It throws up firewalls and alarms. But with this administrator, the NIG was not fighting. It was cooperating. It was as if the system itself believed this user had the right to be there. Sumin spent long hours tracing the digital footsteps of this ghost. She followed the access points, the terminal IDs, the timestamps. The trail led her to some of the most common public terminals on the station. And the timestamps always matched the work schedule of one person, an engineering intern, a student. Sumin leaned back in her chair, stunned. It was not possible. She pulled up the security footage from the cargo bay. She saw Ji-hun walking up to the door. She saw it slide open for her. She saw the look of mild surprise on the girl's face. This was not the face of a master hacker. She knew she had to report this. She gathered all her data and went to see Chief Tov. Tov was in his office reviewing reports. He listened to Sumin without saying a word. When she finished, he was silent for a long time. "You are sure?" he finally asked, his voice low. "The logs do not lie, Chief," Sumin said, pointing to her data pad. "The system grants her access. It changes her clearance level on its own. I have never seen anything like it. The NIG is treating her like she is its supervisor." Tov thought about the flicker on Ji-hun's ID tag in the Arboretum. It was not a glitch. It was a symptom of this larger stranger problem. He remembered how she had fixed the environmental crisis with a series of illogical commands. He had thought it was just quick thinking. Now he wondered if it was something else. "We will not arrest her," Tov decided. "Not yet. She does not seem to be a threat. But we will watch, closely." That evening, Ji-hun was working late in a lower-level data conduit room. It was a narrow, cold room filled with the steady hum of glowing computer servers. Her task was to run a diagnostic on a network router. Daeho had already left for the day. As she worked, the hum in her mind grew louder. It was not an unpleasant feeling. It was like standing near a beehive, feeling the buzz of constant, organized activity. She finished her work and went to log out of the terminal. As her finger hovered over the log out button, the screen changed. Instead of the simple menu, it showed a complex flowing diagram of the station's power grid. A small section was glowing red, indicating a stress point, a place where power was not flowing efficiently. Ji-hun frowned. This was not part of her job. She should log out and leave. But she could not look away from the red glow. It looked like a sore spot, an imperfection in the smooth flow of energy. Without really thinking, her fingers moved over the keyboard. She typed a few commands, suggesting a tiny shift in power distribution from a non-critical system to help the stressed area. The NIG processed the request. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the red glow on the diagram faded to a calm, steady blue. The sore spot was gone. Ji-hun stared at the screen. She had not used any security codes. She had not even logged into a high-level menu. She had just asked, and the system had listened. A wave of cold fear washed over her. This was wrong. This was far above her clearance level. If anyone found out, she would be sent back to Earth in disgrace. She quickly logged out and hurried from the room. She went straight to the small room she shared with Daeho in the intern quarters. He was watching a video on his datapad. "You will not believe what just happened," she said, her voice shaky. She told him everything, about the door in the cargo bay, the trams, and finally the power grid. Daeho's face grew more and more worried with each word. When she finished, he put his datapad down. "Ji-hun, you have to stop," he said, his voice serious. "This is not a game. This is a Calthorian station. They have rules for everything. What you are doing, they will see it as breaking the rules. They could throw us out of the program. They could send us home. But I'm not doing anything on purpose," Ji-hun insisted. "The system just does it for me? That's even worse," Daeho said. "That means there is a bug, a flaw, and it's connected to you. If you keep poking at things, they will find out it's you. We are just students here. We are nobody. We need to be invisible." He was right. She knew he was right. The fear in his eyes was real. "Okay," she whispered, hugging her arms to her chest. "I will be more careful. I will not touch anything I do not have to." But later that night, as she tried to sleep, she could not forget the feeling. The feeling of the vast, intelligent system all around her, listening to her. It was terrifying, but a small part of her also found it fascinating. It was like she had found a secret key and she did not even know what door it opened. In her office, Sumin watched the logs from the data conduit room. She saw the unauthorized access to the power grid. She saw the simple, elegant command that fixed a minor inefficiency no one else had even noticed. She saw that the command came from the terminal where intern Ji-hun had been working. She sent a new report to Tov. The subject line was, "The ghost is real, and it is learning." The summons came the next morning. A message flashed on Ji-hun's datapad, ordering her to report to Chief Tov's office immediately. Her heart sank like a stone. This was it. They had found out. Daeho gave her a worried look as she left their room, his warning from the night before hanging heavily in the air. The walk to the security sector felt very long. Every person she passed seemed to look at her with accusing eyes. She was sure they all knew she had been messing with systems she should not touch. She kept her head down, focusing on the polished floor. When she entered Tov's office, the scene was not what she expected. She thought there would be guards ready to arrest her. Instead, it was just Tov and the network architect Sumin. Sumin sat calmly, her datapad on her lap. Tov stood behind his large desk, his large arms crossed. He gestured for Ji-hun to sit in the chair in front of his desk. She sat, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. She was ready for the shouting, for the accusations. "Intern Ji-hun," Tov began, his voice calm but serious. "Your identification tag. Look at it." Confused, Ji-hun looked down at her chest. The small plastic rectangle was glowing. For the past hour, she had been too nervous to notice. The word on it was no longer student. It did not flicker or change. It was solid and clear. It now read Administrator Provisional. Her mouth fell open. I do not understand," she stammered. "I did not do this." "We know," Sumin said softly. She turned her datapad around so Ji-hun could see. It showed a complex graph. "The NIG did it. The system has been watching you. It has been analyzing your actions since the day in the Arboretum." Tov walked around his desk. "The Nexus integrated grid was built by my people, the Calthorians. We are a logical species. We built the NIG to be the most logical system in the galaxy. We built walls around every program, every system, rules for everything." He stopped in front of her. "But you, Ji-hun, you do not see the walls." Ji-hun just stared at him, not understanding. Sumin explained. "You do not think like the system expects you to think. You do not follow the logical paths. You see a bigger picture. You see patterns. When you entered those commands in the Arboretum, you did not break down the wall to the solution. You simply found a path the wall builders never knew was there. The NIG sees that your solutions work. In its logic, if your solutions work, then you must have the authority to command them. So it gives you the authority. It is learning from you," Tov said. "It is promoting you." Before Ji-hun could process this incredible idea, the room was filled with a loud, blaring alarm. It was different from the one in the Arboretum. This one was deeper, more urgent. The lights in the office flickered to a harsh red. Sumin looked down at her datapad. Her face went pale. "Chief, it's the core. The central processing core of the NIG. What is the status?" Tov's voice was tight. "It's a cascading failure. A logic bomb. It's a problem the system's own protocols cannot solve. It's creating a paradox. The more the NIG tries to fix it, the worse it gets." She looked up, her eyes wide with fear. "If it is not stopped, the core will overload. It will trigger an emergency shutdown of the entire station. An emergency shutdown." Ji-hun knew what that meant. The station would go dark. Life support would stop. The air would run out. "It would be a catastrophe. Can you stop it?" Tov asked Sumin. Sumin shook her head, her fingers flying over her datapad. "No, the standard solutions are just making it worse. It is a dead end. A trap designed for a perfectly logical mind." She looked helplessly at Tov. "The system is fighting itself." Tov turned his yellow eyes from Sumin to Ji-hun. He looked at the young woman who seemed small and frightened in the large chair. He looked at the ID tag on her chest that glowed with the word Administrator. The machine had given her the keys. It had seen something in her that its own creators did not possess. He made a decision. It was the biggest gamble of his life. He walked over to Ji-hun and stood before her. "The machine believes you are its administrator," he said, his voice low and intense over the sound of the alarm. "It trusts your way of thinking. Not ours." He gestured toward the door. "The core is failing. My people built a perfect logical cage around this problem. Can you see the garden outside the walls? Ji-hun's heart was pounding in her chest. She was terrified. They were asking her, a student, to save the entire station. She wanted to say no. She wanted to run back to her room and hide, but then she thought about all the people on the station. She thought about Daeho. She thought about the feeling she had when she fixed the small sore spot in the power grid. The feeling of everything flowing smoothly again. She looked at Tov's face. He was not looking at her with anger or suspicion. He was looking at her with hope. She took a deep, shaky breath. She looked down at her ID tag. Administrator, provisional. She stood up. Her legs felt weak, but she forced herself to be steady. Show me the core, she said. The core chamber was not a room with machines. It was a giant sphere of light and sound. Ji-hun, Tov, and Sumin stood on a narrow platform in the middle of it. All around them, vast streams of data flowed like rivers of colored light. They were inside the mind of the NIG-2 Sumin. It was a nightmare. The beautiful, orderly rivers of light were now a chaotic storm. Jagged red bolts of energy representing the system errors flashed and crackled. The calm voice of the NIG was now a frantic, overlapping echo, reporting failure after failure. Primary containment failing, the voice said. Coolant systems offline. Memory core corruption at 20% and rising. Sumin had a direct link to the standard control systems. I am trying to reroute power, but the failure is blocking me at every turn. It is like trying to put out a fire with oil. Tov watched, his large hands clenched into fists. He could do nothing but stand and watch his station fall apart. Ji-hun stood very still. The noise and the lights were overwhelming. She closed her eyes for a moment. She tried to push away the fear. She tried to listen. Not with her ears, but with the strange sense she had in the data conduit room. The chaos was not just noise to her. It was a feeling. It was like a giant knot, pulled so tight it was about to snap. The NIG was pulling on all the wrong strings, making it worse. She could feel the pressure building, the strain in the system. She opened her eyes. Sumin, she said, her voice surprisingly calm. I need you to shut down the tertiary life support in Sector Delta 12. Sumin stared at her. What? That makes no sense. Delta 12 is a storage sector. It has no connection to the core, and shutting down life support is a violation of... Do it, Tov commanded, his voice booming through the chamber. Sumin, her face pale, entered the command. A small section of the light rivers around them dimmed. To her it was a pointless, dangerous act, but Ji-hun felt it. The knot loosened just a tiny bit. The pressure dropped by a fraction. It was like letting a little air out of a balloon that was about to pop. The power that was running that non-essential system was now free. Okay, Ji-hun said, her eyes fixed on the swirling lights. Daeho, are you there? She was connected to her friend in the main engineering room. Daeho's nervous voice came through a speaker. I'm here. The readings in here are going crazy, Ji-hun. I need you to initiate a coolant flush in Conduit 7. Right now. Conduit 7 is reading normal. The problem is in the primary light. Please, Daeho. Just do it. They heard the sound of Daeho typing. A moment later, a stream of blue coolant flowed through a part of the light rivers that was not even red. It seemed like a waste, but Ji-hun saw it. The cool blue flow washed against the edge of a raging red error. The error, which was a logical loop about overheating, stuttered. The new, unexpected data confused it. The loop broke for a single second. That was all she needed. Now Sumin, reroute auxiliary power through the junction we just cleared. Not to the main core. Route it to the external comms array. Sumin was completely lost. She was a master of the rules, and Ji-hun was breaking every single one. The comms array had nothing to do with the core's stability. But she did it. The power flowed away from the core to a system on the outside of the station. The knot in the core loosened again. Ji-hun was not fighting the problem. She was gently persuading the entire system to shift around it. She was changing the environment so the problem had no room to exist. She was conducting a chaotic symphony. She pointed, and Sumin and Daeho played the notes. The notes made no sense on their own, but together they were creating a new kind of music that the NIG had never heard before. The system was listening. The frantic, overlapping error messages began to slow. The red, jagged bolts of energy softened to a pulsing orange. It's working, Sumin whispered, watching her own readings in disbelief. The cascade is slowing down. The corruption has stopped spreading. Ji-hun's face was concentrated. She was deep in the flow, feeling the last big knot in the system. It was a deep, tangled mess of logic, the central paradox that had started it all. The NIG could not touch it. Any logical approach just made it stronger. She knew she could not untie it. She had to cut it. She walked to the edge of the platform. She placed her hand on the main interface. She did not type a command. She simply asked. She pushed a feeling, an idea through the connection. It was not a line of code. It was a picture of a single wire being pulled from a complex machine. The NIG processed this illogical, intuitive request. For a moment, the entire chamber froze. The rivers of light stopped moving. The sound vanished. It was total silence. Then, with a gentle sighing sound, the central knot of red light simply unraveled. It dissolved into a shower of golden sparks that faded away. The rivers of light returned to their calm, steady flow. The room was filled with a soft, peaceful hum. The core was stable. The crisis was over. Ji-hun took a deep, trembling breath. She felt incredibly tired. She leaned against the railing of the platform. Soo-min was staring at her data pad, her mouth open. I do not believe it. All systems are returning to normal. The cascade is completely neutralized. Tav walked over to Ji-hun. He looked from her exhausted face to the now calm core. He had seen it with his own eyes. He had seen a human girl talk to a machine in a language of feeling, and the machine had understood. He gave a slow, respectful nod. You did it, he said, his voice full of awe. You saved the station. The calm in the core chamber lasted for only a minute. The red alert lights switched off, and the normal soft white lighting returned. The frantic voice of the NIG was gone, replaced by its usual quiet hum. Ji-hun felt a wave of relief so strong her knees felt weak. But the peace was broken by the hiss of the main chamber door sliding open. Standing there was Station Commander Krieg. He was a Kalanthorian, the species who had designed the NIG. He was tall and thin, with gray skin and large, completely black eyes that showed no emotion. He was a being of pure, cold logic. He was followed by 2 security officers. He looked around the chamber, his black eyes taking in the scene. Soo-min at her console, Tav standing protectively near Ji-hun, and the intern herself. Looking small and tired. The crisis is over, Krieg stated. It was not a question. His voice was flat and precise. Yes, Commander, Tav said, stepping forward. Intern Ji-hun was able to stabilize the core. Krieg's head tilted. His black eyes focused on Ji-hun. The intern? Explain. Soo-min tried to help. Sir, she used a series of non-standard commands. She bypassed the primary. Bypassed, Krieg interrupted. You allowed a provisional student to bypass core safety protocols? He turned his gaze to Tav. This is a catastrophic breach of security. Her methods were not logged, not tested, not approved. They were feelings. They worked, Tav said, his voice growing deeper, a warning rumble in his chest. Luck is not a procedure. Krieg's voice was sharp. The Nexus integrated grid is the pinnacle of logical order. We cannot allow it to be corrupted by the chaotic, unpredictable instincts of a primitive species. Ji-hun flinched at the word primitive. She looked at the floor. Tav took another step, putting himself almost between Krieg and Ji-hun. Your perfect logic was about to destroy this station, Commander. Her chaos saved it. You built a perfect logical cage to solve every problem. She sees the open field outside the cage. That is not a flaw. It is a faculty your people simply do not possess. That is humanity, fuck yeah. The human phrase sounded strange in his rumbling voice, but its meaning was clear. It was a declaration of pride in what made her different. Krieg was unmoved. The danger is too great. We will proceed with a full system lockdown and purge. The NIG will be shut down and rebooted. All non-standard changes will be erased. He turned to his officers. Secure the intern. She is to be confined to quarters until the next transport to Earth. The security officers moved forward. A full system purge. Ji-hun knew what that meant. It would take days. During that time, critical systems would be offline. Medical life support, environmental controls for sensitive species. It would be a disaster. People would suffer, maybe even die, just to wipe her actions from the system. Tav was about to protest, but Ji-hun acted first. She felt a surge of anger. She would not let this happen. She would not let this logical, unfeeling commander hurt people just to prove a point. As the officers approached her, she looked at the main console. She did not move. She did not type. She just thought. She pushed her will toward the system, the way she had at the end of the crisis. No. The NIG heard her. The security officers stopped. The door to the chamber, which was starting to close for the lockdown, slid back open. The console in front of Sumin lit up with a new message, glowing in calm green letters. Lockdown command overridden. Authorization. Administrator Ji-hun. Commander Krieg stared at the message. For the first time, his emotionless face showed something. Confusion, then disbelief. This is not possible. My authority is supreme. Not anymore, Sumin said softly, looking at her screen. The system. It is listening to her. It is choosing her. Krieg stepped quickly to the console. He typed his own command codes, his long fingers moving with swift precision. Access denied, the screen flashed back at him. He tried again. Access denied, he was locked out. The commander of the station was locked out of his own system by a student from Earth. He turned slowly to face Ji-hun. She was still standing in the same spot, but she looked different now. She was not hiding. She was not looking at the floor. She met his black eyes with a steady gaze. The ID tag on her chest glowed brightly, unquestionably Administrator. You see? Tav said, his voice quiet but firm. It is not a rebellion. It is an evolution. The system has found a better way. Krieg looked from the defiant human girl to the loyal security chief, and finally to the screen that denied him access. The logic he had built his entire life upon had been broken by something he could not understand. He had no more commands to give. He was powerless. Without another word, Commander Krieg turned and walked slowly out of the core chamber. The two security officers, unsure of what to do, followed him. The chamber was silent again. The only sound was the gentle hum of the perfectly stable core. Ji-hun let out a long, shaky breath. The fight was over. She had won. She had not just fixed the machine. She had convinced it, and its master, that she was in charge. 1 week later, the command bridge of the Omni Citadel was quiet and calm. The large screen at the front showed a field of stars, peaceful and steady. The crew, a mix of different species, worked at their stations with a quiet sense of order. The door to the bridge slid open, and Ji-hun walked in. She was not wearing her old student jumpsuit. She wore a simple, dark blue uniform of a station officer. It was clean and professional. On her chest was her identification tag. It glowed with a soft white light, the letters clear and permanent. Administrator Ji-hun. Heads turned as she walked past. People nodded to her with respect. They all knew the story. They knew the student who had saved the station. She walked to the center of the bridge where Station Commander Krieg stood. He looked at her, his black eyes impossible to read. He had been humbled. The logic he worshipped had been defeated by a human instinct he could not comprehend. He had no choice but to accept the new reality. Administrator Ji-hun, he said, his voice flat but not unfriendly. The station's performance metrics have improved by 12% since you began your adjustments. He still could not bring himself to call them procedures. Thank you. Commander, Ji-hun said. She did not smile, but she met his gaze evenly. The council has approved your new position, Krieg continued. You are officially the station systems administrator. Your first duty is to oversee the integration of your methods into the NIG's learning protocols. He paused, as if the next words were difficult to say. You will teach it to think more like you. Ji-hun nodded. I have already started. Su-min and Daeho are helping me. She looked across the bridge to a new console that had been installed. Su-min was there, her face focused as she worked on the complex code. Next to her was Daeho. He was no longer an intern. He was now a junior systems analyst. He looked up and saw Ji-hun. He gave her a small, proud smile. He was no longer afraid. He was excited. They were her team. Their job was to build a bridge between human intuition and Calthorian logic. They were teaching the NIG how to recognize patterns, how to feel for inefficiencies, how to understand the maybe and the what if. Chief Tav walked onto the bridge and stood beside Ji-hun. He looked out at the vast field of stars on the main screen. You know, he rumbled quietly so only she could hear, they built this station to be the pinnacle of order in a chaotic universe. He glanced at her ID tag and then at her face. They just never expected the universe to appoint one of its own as the manager. Ji-hun smiled a little at that. She looked out at the stars with him. She could feel the NIG all around her. It was not a silent, cold machine anymore. It was a presence. Partner, it was learning from her, and she was learning from it. It was curious. It asked her questions in the form of data streams and system reports. She answered with feelings and ideas. She was no longer just a student from Korea. She was the administrator of the Omni Citadel. She had not fought for the title. She had not taken it. She had simply walked a path no one else could see, and the most logical system in the galaxy had decided to follow. The station was safe. The people were safe. And for the first time, the future felt not just orderly but full of possibility. She placed her hand on the cool surface of the command console. She could feel the gentle hum of the station through her fingertips. It was the sound of a machine and a little bit of humanity working together. It was the sound of home.